So I wanted to first start off our time this morning and giving some structure, some introduction to the topic. And what really led to the development of this webinar training series today was in the context of what we're all facing in not only Indian country, the country, and in the world. First, I would like to acknowledge a reality that we're all familiar with, and that's the loss and the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus pandemic in our tribal communities. As we face these new unprecedented times and living within this new reality, I've taken some time to reflect on the history of our communities, and especially with the tribal nations in our USAT region, the history that we have had with pandemics and how our communities have responded and become resilient to those impacts. As we continue to follow CDC guidelines and respond to the public health emergency, there is now an ever-growing shift to focus on the economic recovery, and that's mindful anytime that you turn on the news, and especially following any of the work on up in Congress legislatively on recovery efforts. In the latest federal relief packages, Indian country has seen an unprecedented inclusion of Indian country priorities, especially seen in set-aside dollars and program inclusions. An approximate total so far of $40 billion have been set aside for Indian country. And just a very quick overview on the slide that you're seeing, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or the CARES Act, set aside $8 billion for tribal nations, and the most recent, the American Rescue Plan, or the ARP, you might hear it, had a set aside for $32 billion set aside for tribal nations. And the reason why I mentioned and growing is because those were just the inclusions specifically for Indian country. It does not include other programs that were authorized that tribal enterprises and individual Native businesses are eligible for, or the updates into existing programs that updated the eligibility for tribal communities and governments to participate in. And one such example of that is, take for example, the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program. There was no tribal set aside, but tribal enterprises and businesses were and are eligible to participate in that program. So there's a lot, especially in the American Rescue Plan, we're still learning on all the opportunities within those appropriations. Oh, there we go. So first, let's talk about business assistance programs and economic development. Probably one of the most generalized definition of economic development that I was able to research and find is it's a program, a group of policies, or in a set of activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community. But exactly what does economic development look like? And what does it look like in your tribal community? Feel free to take a time. And one of my favorite questions that I like to ask is, what does economic development look like in your tribal community? What are some of the programs that you have? What does economic development mean to your community? Feel free to share those in the chat function. Some of the generally accepted tenets or activities that you'll see throughout the economic development profession include strategic planning, marketing and attraction of a particular community or attraction of a particular economic cluster, financing programs, workforce development programs and resources, some activities in foreign direct investment and exporting, business retention and expansion, and entrepreneurial and small business development. If you kind of take a look at that list, even though it's very generalized, some of those some of the items listed don't include all the breadth of what it include what happens in our economic development communities. Particularly what I notice when I see this list from time to time is it doesn't include a lot of the work that we do within our tribal enterprises. And that can take a lot of breadth, experience, and time from other economic development activities. Today's webinar, we're actually going to focus on these bottom two, the business retention and expansion, and the entrepreneurial and small business development. So business retention and expansion, starting from a bit of a macro level and then narrowing down to what I consider micro. Business retention expansion, or BRNE for short, is designed, our economic development programs designed to help existing businesses to either retain or keep businesses or provide assistance for businesses to expand that are already in a community. There's also a bit, if you do some more research, there's also a lot that goes into attraction. So trying to advertise or market your community for other businesses to locate there. This applies to all businesses, doesn't really limit on the size, how long a business has been in operation, how many employees they have. So it can be from small shops to large employer anchoring institutions. The impact of these existing firms have in a community. If they close, they eliminate local jobs. If they close, they lead to additional closings. It's kind of that snowball effect of a rock or boulder rolling down the mountain is what I envision, that if you have one big business that closes, the threat is that you might have other businesses in the community close. And then that also leads to a lower community confidence. And what we introduced on the last slide is that then can also impact the quality of life in a community. And applying that in our tribal communities, we've heard for many years this threat, the realistic threat of the brain drain of tribal citizens not moving into our communities or growing up in a community, they leave for better jobs, but then they might not come back. And so this focusing on business retention and expansion, helping build out or supporting the local economy really has an impact in the overall quality of life for a community and has long-lasting impacts. As you can imagine, the opposites, expanding and keeping business in a community, has the opposite effects. So it can keep or increase local jobs. And anyone who, I know a lot of us have experience of applying for local economic development grants. One of the questions they always ask is how many jobs will be created? But then the next question is how many jobs will be kept? So we definitely want to keep local jobs, maintain the economic health of economic sectors in a community, and it helps the community image and confidence. So the role of economic development in a business retention expansion program is the program can provide resources directly with finance or technical assistance. They broker resources and partnerships with other groups, and they advocate for the business community's concerns. This, as we see in tribal communities and in Indian country, there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of actors who participate in economic development. So this could be the economic development director, this could be a program administrator, this could be elected tribal leaders themselves. And I imagine that a lot of this work is already engaged in. It's just adding this new name or terminology to that practice of business retention and expansion. So let's talk about what these activities actually look like. And that's mainly through business visitation or surveying, where you actually have your employees or your team members actually go out and meet with these members. Now, obviously working through home, they might be done in a virtual setting through a phone call or a video chat. And this is why I sort of equate that a lot of this work is already existing. We all know that there might be that one person in the office that knows everyone and sort of knows what's going on in a particular business. Or you might just do this sort of unconsciously in the back of your mind, where you just constantly check in with your business institutions, your anchors, your long-standing businesses, because you just want to check in and see how they're going. What are the impacts of of COVID? How are they being nimble and being resilient to respond to these new these workforce changes? This business visitation and surveying is really important, and they allow for an early warning of any economic problems or concerns that you and your staff team can maybe address head on. And also they offer an opportunity to establish a database or a baseline of the economic well-being. And combining that, because I kind of overglossed on the previous slide, the SWOT analysis, you're halfway to a really solid and very rounding comprehensive economic development strategy, a SEDS document, or a strategic planning document that oversees the entire local community. Some of the economic development tools that you could use for these are the existing marketing efforts or plans the community has, regional-based economic clusters to provide support. Particularly, one example that came to mind was in the Northeast with forestry products. That is a very wide and popular economic cluster. So some of the tribal communities and individual businesses might want to work with local resource partners in addressing the business retention and expansion. You have your workforce development resources and partnerships, particularly with local universities and colleges. And then you have the financial resources of loan programs, linking capital to other equity investors, incentives that the tribal community might want to offer to businesses to stay or to expand or to not leave. And prior to technical assistance, you'll want to determine which companies you would want to target for assistance, develop standards for participating companies in terms of you might not want to really do a lot of surveying and outreach to keep businesses within, if they haven't been around for 12 months, for a full year. You might want to say, okay, after these businesses have been around, they establish a history in our community, that's when we want to really start engaging in these activities. Sorry. So that was more of a macro, in my mind, equating a macro level. A micro level is working with our entrepreneurs and small businesses. So where BR&E relates to existing firms, entrepreneurs tend to be, assistance revolves more around new or startup businesses. Entrepreneur programs tend to focus on an individual, and small business programs tend to focus on the business entity or the size of the operation itself. What's really interesting is there's a bunch of different definitions of what a small business is. I believe the current definition within the Small Business Administration is a firm with less than 500 people. I think if you asked a lot of people on the sidewalk, that's not exactly what they would equate to be a small business as. There are some other best practices and examples out there within their small business programs. They tend to find a small business as less than 25 employees. And that might be a little more reasonable and maybe a little more applicable to some of the businesses that are in tribal communities. Entrepreneur programs and small business creates local jobs. They increase or impact generational wealth, and they help diversify the economic base. And really it's, I've also had some time in planning for these slides of thinking about entrepreneurship and small business. When I think of our tribal nations in these USET region in the south and eastern part of the country, I think about the historical impact of colonization. And I think of reclaiming Native and Indigenous truth that entrepreneurialism is ingrained in who we are as tribal people. It's just, I think there is an emerging thought now or embrace of we're shedding the cloak of that in colonial nature of how it's defined or how success is defined. And we're now looking through that through an Indigenous lens. Reclaiming Indigenous truth and entrepreneurialism has many benefits in this way. And it's not, when I thought about in looking through this through an Indigenous lens, it's not defining success by a certain dollar amount of how much money has been created or wealth. It's realizing and leaning on our Indigenous values of redistribution, of supporting our communities. And the economic term is sort of that dollar turnover, that we know that when we support businesses within our community, we will then reinvest that dollar into other communities, other projects, other initiatives. So it's not this colonial mindset of keeping all the dollars for myself. And this is supported, and I agree with Dr. Miriam Jorgensen. She works through the Harvard Project of Economic Development, and also I know through the University of Arizona, that when we support this private sector growth and this entrepreneurialism, we're supporting tribal sovereignty efforts. And I haven't read too much more or seen a lot of other presentations that really equate this work into tribal sovereignty. Elements of a small business or entrepreneurial program, is sort of think of it like a three-legged stool that you'll see most common, is the technical assistance, providing a safe business space, a safe landing space for businesses, and that includes also for potential failure, and then the financial assistance. Technical assistance can be anything from, and this is just a very short list, there's a lot more: business plan development, assistance with grant or loan applications, training and managing staff, or training business owners of how to manage staff, financial marketing, product development advice, accounting and record keeping and how to keep good books, workforce development assistance, and networking opportunities. So what do small business and entrepreneurial programs, how can they look like in your tribal community? Some of the tools and resources that you might have available to you are chambers of commerces, whether that is a tribally owned and managed chamber of commerce, I apologize, or the local community, the local town, that sort of opportunity. I did want to highlight and address there is an emerging chambers of commerces throughout the USET region, but also if your community is interested in exploring a chamber of commerce, there are examples throughout Indian country. They might just not be in the USET region, but there are plenty of resources and we'd love to connect you offline if you would like to learn more. There's also incubator programs. This could be anywhere from keeping a sort of office space that's for low cost rental or for free. Community development financial institutions, CDFIs, that are local to your in your community, provide low cost loans, but also provide valuable technical assistance and can help with those guiding or coaching moments. And then there might be an existing tribal loan or a tribal grant fund. So especially in developing and thinking about the purpose of today's call, I really thought about my own tribe at the Porch Bandit Creek Indians. We have a longstanding loan fund that any tribal citizen can apply for and I believe it's considered like a forgivable loan. So it's almost like a grant. It's been ongoing for many years. It could, I think adding some more technical assistance, it could really grow and be something else. So there might be some existing programs that you might be familiar with or might not be that can really grow and flourish by adding some of these other activities. Prior to the technical assistance, you'll definitely want to take a look at what advisory staff or resources that you might have available to you and determine what sort of screening process of, is a student that just got out of school. You might not want to, that might be more of a risk. then you might be willing to take, but it could not. So you'll want to determine what your screening process of the entrepreneurs and the small businesses you might want to consider. And really, especially as we talk about the different resources that are available to you, that's a great lead into our next guest speakers. I wanted to just leave on this final slide. This is my contact information. Again, my name is Rebecca Narragon. I'm a citizen of the Porch Bandit Creek Indians. My email and cell phone number are available to you. This was just a very short introduction into these topics. I glanced over a lot. There's a lot more that we can go into these particular topics, but I didn't want to monopolize the time. There are actually training sessions if you want to learn more. There are whole multiple day training sessions on just some of these individual topics. If you would like to learn more about those or would be interested, I would love to share that information. So feel free to reach out to me directly through the email or our cell phone number. So as we consider our next agenda, I would like to introduce Ms. Tina Begue. I saw in her title is trainer advisor, but I imagine she does so much more, just like we all do with multiple hats, but she is with Sister Sky. They have a contract, but she's also an advisor with the Small Business Administration and the Office of Native American Affairs. And she can speak more to about her work that she's been doing with the SBA and technical assistance that she's seen with small business programs throughout Indian country and working with small business owners. So with Tina, I will stop sharing and kick it over to you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. It's such an honor. I'm here in Montana, though, and I don't know if anyone knows me. I'm a vampire, so getting up early is a challenge for me. So hopefully I won't sound too crazy this morning, but I'm going to get my PowerPoint up here. I have a small PowerPoint, but mostly I'll probably just talk to you about most of what I want to talk about today. So let me get this figured out here. I'm showing my slideshow. All right, could you confirm, are you seeing the native business, the first slide? Awesome, thank you. A little bit, I'm gonna just go ahead and introduce myself and kind of go through a little presentation, but as I'm speaking, I'm gonna be talking a lot more about kind of how we developed our program and kind of my experience in it. My name is Tina Begue. I'm Bilagana Nishli Tapaham Bashishchi, Bilagana Dashishche, Ashini Dashanala. And what that means is I'm born for the water's edge and salt clans. I'm from Rock Point, Arizona, but I've been born and raised on the Flathead Reservation. My mother was from here, and I make my home in Arley, Montana. I have over 25 years of business experience. I've dedicated my whole career to business. My first, I guess, stint was I worked in a business office, and my end goal, which I still want to do this, I want to be a chief financial officer of a tribal college, and then eventually I'd like to be a president of a tribal college. I have over, gosh, I think I did 15 years of experience running a national nonprofit. I used to run a program called American Indigenous Business Leaders. I did that for many years. And then recently I was teaching at a tribal college for the past 10 years. And when you teach for a tribal college, you teach from, anything from intro to business to finance. And you teach, 15 credits a quarter. It's a brutal experience, but I just like to say I love that the experience that I got in the classroom and being around Native people, especially adult learners. And so I am here to share with you kind of my experience with doing that and how we designed our Native American Development Program at Sister Sky. I have a master's in business. Personally, I've been married for 26 years. I have 10 grandchildren. I just got one on the 25th. His name is Adonis Kalel Stops, and he's so cute. They just keep coming faster than I can keep up with them. I try to, bead them moccasins or something, but I'm a couple behind, so I have to catch up. But that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Sister Sky. You may be familiar with our program. We have a products division, and we also have a federal contracting division. Our products division is on health and wellness, and we have products like Kevin's Care, White Willow. Check out our website. We have some great products at sistersky.com. And then we have a federal contracting side, which is sisterinc.com. And that's how we got involved in, thank you for that comment. I said, I'm terrible at sales. I can't even sell a raffle ticket, but as far as Sister Sky products, I use my favorites, White Willow, and one of my grandsons has really bad eczema, like really bad. And when I started working for Sister Sky, I tried the Kevin's Care on him, and now I just buy it by the boxfuls and send it to him because it really does help him. On our federal contracting side, we have a lot of federal contracts that we go after, and one of them was business, of course. We kind of have our contract through the SBA, and then we also have a new initiative that we're doing, and we're calling it the Native Business Center, and that's on our nonprofit arm of Sister Sky. So we have a lot of initiatives going on, and I get I get to kind of play around and have fun in the entrepreneurial area. That's my expertise. I've dedicated my whole career to it. And so I'm happy to kind of share with you what we've been doing here at Sister Sky. We received a contract, as Rebecca said, with the Small Business Administration Office of Native American Affairs to provide empowerment workshops and train the trainer workshops as well. And the workshops are designed to provide specialized training and technical assistance to new and established Native American entrepreneurs and artists, because as we know, most of our people, have artistic ability, and it is a great avenue to become an entrepreneur. But even people that are not artistic, I'm kind of unique in that I have my personal business. I have kind of a 3 arms of my personal business. I do accounting. I specialize in accounting. I specialize in business education, which you're hearing about today. And then I have a design arm of my business where I do my arts and crafts. I do sewing and beadwork and different things like that. I always tell everybody that keeps me sane. And so when we decided, when we got the contract, they contacted me because I think they know that I've been working in Indian country and dedicated most of my career to it. And so they were seeking expertise in the field, which at the time I really didn't know that I had, that I guess I didn't view myself like that. And now that I kind of understand what's going on, I see that my experience in the classroom is so key to any entrepreneurship program. And I think because of the topic today, that's what I'm going to mainly focus on. We decided when we started this that we would look at how we were going to do the trainings and how we were going to set them up. And we wanted to use best practices for serving Native people. we wanted it to be, you know, learner driven, use role models, case studies, and then most of all, facilitated learning. And if you don't mind, I'd just like to kind of have a conversation with you. I'll put it in the chat here area. I have my screen up, so I don't want to, I'll put it in here at the end and you might be able to write it down right now. But there was a paper, and it was done on the Journal of Economics and Sustainable Development. It was done in 2015. And Monica, one of the sisters, came across this, and she sent it to me when we very first were planning our entrepreneurial workshops. And a few things in here really just jumped out at me as a Native American and a person that teaches about business. And I've always said this at a tribal college setting, and I've always talked about this in my classroom, because I just like to remind people that we created you know, there's mainstream universities out there where a person could go get a business education. But Native Americans, we created tribal colleges, and we created our own colleges to serve a particular type of learner. And we wanted to, in general, tribal colleges were created so that, you know, you're not following the mainstream way the way people learn. You're doing it. Otherwise, I always tell people, otherwise you could just go to a mainstream university. So we created tribal colleges to cater to a certain set of people, and then a certain type of people and how they learn. And anyway, I came across this paper, and it's called Designing Entrepreneurship Education and Training Program in Search of a Model. And I'll put that in the chat area so that you guys could all find this and research it. But I wanted to point out a few things that it said in here, which I've always wanted to say this in a classroom or when I'm teaching, but I didn't quite know how to put it into words. And this paper really, you know, kind of just said it for me. And what I really like about this paper is it talks about other countries and how they do entrepreneurship education. And it's really similar to how we as Native Americans should and could develop our entrepreneurial programs. It talks about approaches to teaching entrepreneurship, and it really criticizes methods like lectures, written exams, theory, and it considers them inappropriate for entrepreneurship education in general. So across the board, whether you're mainstream setting or a tribal setting, it's saying that a traditional entrepreneurship program, if you have those in your, just the type of a person it is in general, a general entrepreneur, that if you use those methods, it's not going to be as effective as other methods. And so that really kind of, when I taught at a tribal college and how I taught, I always say this to people, I always say it's different. I can't explain it the way that you teach, the way that you interact with your students, the physical setup of a classroom, the strategic of how tables are set up, the lighting, the walls, all of those kinds of things are really important to education programs. Another piece that it said is, let me find it. It says, and it was so interesting. It says entrepreneurship programs should be encouraged to cope in new ways with the real world by emphasizing, number one, learning by doing. Number two, encouraging participants to find and explore wider concepts relating to a problem from a multidisciplinary viewpoint. Helping participants, or that was number three, is helping participants to develop more independence from external sources of information and expert advice, and to think for themselves, thus giving ownership of learning. Number 4, encouraging the use of feelings, attitudes, and values outside of information, which in turn will place greater emphasis on experience-based learning. And then 5, it says providing greater opportunity for building up of networks and contacts in the outside world linked with their learning focus. And then the last one says 6, helping participants to develop emotional responses when dealing with conflict situations, encouraging them to make choices and commitments to actions in conditions of stress and uncertainty. And I love that because the type of student that comes from Indian country, they're just, I still can't really put it into words on what kind of learner they are. They're just, I always say, if you go work at a tribal college, you should get paid triple, because Native American expect a lot more from a teacher. They want to have a relationship with you. They have to like you. And they can sense right away that if you're there just to collect a paycheck and not be immersed in their lives and their culture, then you will not last long at a tribal college. And then they also have, a lot going on in their lives. They're, non-traditional students. They have children. They have other family members that they're responsible for. They want a good education that's to the point, but that's really good. And when we design our entrepreneurial programs, we have to keep that all in mind. And we can't use the typical, lecture and kind of, I don't know what you call it, but canned presentations. And so what we did at Sister Sky is we took a lot of this, this paper, a couple other papers that I probably don't have time to share with you all today, but I could talk all day about this topic. But we took all of that. We took our own experience of how we've learned to do entrepreneurship. And so we designed our programs to kind of follow that and to keep an eye on that. Another thing in this paper that I've always said is it says that we have students in entrepreneurship, we have a left side of our brain and a right side of our brain. And when I worked at the tribal college, it talks about in here about hands-on, teaching our people about hands-on experience, using your hands, showing them, using examples. I used a lot of case studies. One of my classes that I taught is called Economic Development on Indian Reservations. And if you've ever taught a book and some kind of thing to follow, if you're teaching, economics or accounting, finance, it doesn't change, and it's been the same. I can prove from 1884, it's been the same. And when we take and we decide that we're going to teach entrepreneurship or economic development to Native American people, we just don't fit into this mold of what we're used to, how we teach it. And so it's very important, number one, to have a skilled a teacher to teach the program. It's important that you have someone that uses hands-on experience. I think all of us can go right now today and get online and look at any kind of, you could go to sba.gov and go through their learning center and learn about how to do a business plan, how to open a checking account. You can go to LinkedIn Learning and, find out all these amazing, entrepreneurial programs. But I'm still a firm believer that you have to have a trained teacher in order to deliver that, and it has to be one-on-one, and it has to show that trainer cares about that person and that's empathetic. Another thing that we decided when you take our course is that our course is designed for business owners, mentors, planners, people in different economic development programs. So it's pretty wide range of people that would benefit from our programs, because we do the empowerment workshop is designed for kind of like an entrepreneur. And then we have train the trainer, which, as I said before, that's the whole idea of the train the trainer, is because a lot of Native people, we've been working in Indian country for many years on economic development issues, but we're not trained on how to teach it and how to interact with Native people. And it's just different from how you typically would teach a program. And so if we provide train the trainers and empowerment workshops. I'm going to talk a little bit about, we also know that when you're delivering economic development programs or entrepreneurship programs, Native Americans, we do not kind of connect with it unless it has a cultural context to it. We can't, it doesn't mean that much to us if it's just something we can identify with. And this white paper says that too. It goes even deeper. I could talk about this all day, but it says educators need to relearn how to teach if they want to be effective. Day-to-day participation and involvement must be highly valued rather than end-of-the-year exams. And I highlighted that, and then I said that students discovered they felt that the case method was more effective in developing analytical skills. And so we designed, at Sister Sky, we wanted to create something that was culturally significant. And we know that a teepee is not, every tribe doesn't use one and so forth. But we chose the teepee and we're calling it a teepee business model. And we wanted to kind of talk about it as if each piece of our model is equally important. And as an entrepreneur, you should probably understand and know the 8 modules that you're seeing here. And that's how we came up with kind of how we are going to deliver and do our module. And also, just so you know, that the SBA had some guidelines that they wanted certain, topics that they wanted in there. And so we incorporated that into our teaching methods as well. And our modules are really designed so that you get, an orientation to entrepreneurship. So like, what does it really, really mean to be an entrepreneur? How are you going to market it? What are ways that you can organize your business? How do you set up your cash flows? How do you manage that? So once you get into business, the first 4 are kind of easy. You can follow these certain steps to start a business, but then how do you manage it? Because we all know, and I know for sure for being an accountant, I can see a train wreck coming in a minute when someone calls me and they say, hey, could you do our accounting for us? It's a pattern. So entrepreneurs that are organized in their financials, they balance their bank statement every month, they understand their financial statements, they know how to make cash flow projections, and they understand that they do much better. It's the folks that can do the top four, they can get started, they can organize their business, they can, kind of get their financial books started, but then they kind of fall off when it comes to managing it. We also see that then that affects if you can do small business financing. So that affects that because you can't go get financing unless you have a set of financial statements that are good. We also know that in Indian country, we have a lot of pop-up economy type of businesses. You don't and we need to cater to those. So one of the things I think about is even just myself. So at Sister Sky, I have an hourly job, it's pretty consistent, and I feel good about that. And then my personal business is more not as stable. It's a more entrepreneurial. You're taking a bigger risk. And you'll see in Indian country, a lot of us do that. We're multitaskers. We have a side hustle to support our families. And so it's really important that we understand that it's not like a typical entrepreneur where you just have one business and that you can focus on that. Well, for Native Americans, we have one business or maybe several businesses. We have a full-time job. We have, families and extended families that we're responsible for. And so it becomes a bigger kind of juggling act of how we reach those type of people, and then how do we serve them. Then the last module is how do we connect people to resources. So that's the biggest thing, is you can give people and entrepreneurs all the education and information possible, but how do you connect them to the right person that can help them? And I've said this over and over, it's a term called enterprise facilitation. And in this paper, it talks about it again. I keep looking at, or keep talking about this paper, but it's kind of, it describes how Native American programs should be built without really saying that. So when you do enterprise facilitation, you're more like, you set up in an area and then you tell people, you kind of put the word out there that you're there and you're kind of like a business advisor. And then people come to you and tell you what they need and where the areas that they're need help with. And then you help them with those certain areas. And that seems to be more effective in Indian country. And so our business, our module 8 is designed to do that. So we connect people with the right person to help them. A little bit more on our empowerment workshops. Because of this pandemic, in the beginning, we were going to go out and visit 10 regions twice and be physically there in Indian country. We know that's the best and most effective approach. But because of the pandemic, we had to change to virtual workshops. And that's good for some people, but it's also not good for other people. We have connectivity issues, we have tech hardware issues. Even in some of the meetings that I've been in recently, a lot of our people don't have a webcam, they don't have a mic. They're taking the class from their phone, or they might have a screen, but then calling in on their phone. We see people that come to our events drop on in and out, and we're like, what is going on? Well, it's their connectivity and their bandwidth. And so we know that virtual is not the ideal way, but right now that's what we've had to adapt to. Hopefully in the next year we can get out there in Indian country, because it's so much better to be one-on-one that person to know you and trust you and create a relationship with you. But our workshops, we designed them for two types of learners. And you'll notice that we have, if you go to our website, you can check, I encourage you to check them out, but we have 7 through 12, I think, up right now. We're doing them in quarterly things, but we did them we have a 2-day format, which is 2 days is 6 hours a day, and you go through 4 modules in a day. And that's more for a type of learner that just, wants it fast, quick, and done in 2 days. And then another type of learner is one that is for, I don't even know if learner is a word. I keep saying that, but I apologize, it's not a word. The 2 weeks is more for like 90 minutes a day. So you're more focused and you can focus on one at a time. What we found out is a lot of our people that are taking these courses will take the 2-day one, and then they'll come back around and they'll take the 2-week one, just because the 2-day one was too, intense and fast, and they wanted a more focused and kind of focus on each module for 90 minutes. And so I recommend people try it and see what kind of learner you are, and then you can have plenty of opportunities to take our training. We also offer continuing education credits. A lot of our people require those for certain programs. Another thing that we do in our empowerment workshops is we provide recordings. So you can go to our empowerment workshop and you can walk yourself through it and watch the recordings and do a self-directed. We know that's probably, maybe if you have 10 Native Americans take the course, probably 2 of them, maybe 1 or 2 will do it that way. Most of them will choose the live option, where you have a live person such as myself, and you can interact with them. You can ask questions. It's more of a direct relationship. We also have our Train the Trainer webinars, which teach you how, as a trainer, on how to deliver these workshops in your communities. Because again, I say that we don't have trainers that are trained on how to do this. Like, how do you, present the information? How do you develop that relationship with the participant, both virtually, if you're doing it virtually, or if you're doing it in person? I think we have April, June, and maybe September, and 3 more that we've already done one, and we have one, I think, on the 1st of April. So if you're interested in that. The last thing I just really wanted to talk about, and I wanted just to leave it open for questions about how do you sign up for one of our workshops. You can go to our website and you can check out any of our offerings. And I just wanted to let you know, it's only one workshop. It's the same workshop. We just do it over and over 20 times a year. And we do it at different times and options so that you can, it's more flexible for you. Another thing that I wanted to say, let me see if I can stop my share so I can talk to you. I think I have to go wanted to say, okay, so one of the key things that I thought about in this model, it says entrepreneurship teachers should value the creation process, which is super important for Native American learners. And this word just jumped out at me. It says, control is the fundamental basis of bureaucracy. And for Native American people, I say this all the time, that we are very good at being bureaucratic. We've been taught that most of our lives, and maybe like governmental, the way we receive our funding and, you know, how we operate our lives. It's more bureaucratic than entrepreneurial. And so to kind of break that mindset and to deliver an entrepreneurial program that is more adapted to Native American learners is kind of more of a challenge, but when you do it, the benefits of doing that will outweigh any type of program that you might come across. So I would just like to open it up and see if you have any comments, questions, or did I go too fast? I don't know what time it is. Right. Or did I go over?
I don't see any questions in the chat function. Feel free to unmute your mic if you would like to ask Ms. Tina a question, or we'll also have an opportunity for questions at the end. So if you need some more time to think about some questions, you'll have that opportunity. Our next panel group of speakers are from our very good friends at First Nations Owista. We have a bit of a team collaborative effort from Owista that includes just a quick introduction, Ms. Florence Lutka, the Chief Financial Officer. Heather Rodemaker-Taylor is the Director of Programs, and Ms. Linnell Smith is the Programs Manager. And I first was introduced to Owista very early when I came on board at USAID, and they have been immensely helpful in their knowledge sharing and their resources. So with that, I will pass it off to our Owista team.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning from New Mexico. My name's Linnell Smith, and as Rebecca said, I am a program manager with Owista Corporation. So I definitely want to extend our thanks to USET for giving Owista the opportunity to share information on native CDFIs and how you can use them in your community and how you can access services to support your small business and entrepreneurs. So please keep in mind that a lot of the information is going to be kind of that high level overview, but we definitely can talk deeply and at length on any of these topics, but we won't go into that depth for time's sake. But I want to preface that too, to say that we're definitely here as a resource going forward. So we want to make sure that you're able to tap into any information that we're sharing, and we can definitely have a deeper conversation. So just a quick bit of background to Owista. If you're not familiar with our organization, we are a native CDFI national intermediary, and we're located in Longmont, Colorado, with the majority of the staff working remotely, of course, due to COVID. So I'm here in New Mexico. And I want to share a little bit of kind of what Owista does too. So as an intermediary, we're actually able to lend capital to other native CDFIs, but we also have that customizable TA piece to where we can help support an organization that's creating a CDFI, or even with mature CDFIs and expanding services or adding additional capital, or want to launch new loan products. So a little more background to what is a CDFI? So we throw this acronym around. I even heard it in Rebecca's intros too. It stands for Community Development Financial Institution, and we're going to break that down a little bit, and we're going to talk about all the great things that a CDFI can do. And so there are approximately 1,100 CDFIs in the country, but the native CDFIs, I like to call them the unicorns of the bunch. So we're this awesome subgroup of the total, which is about 70 right now, of native CDFIs in the country. So you might have one in your community. Oops, sorry about that. Trying to do a couple of things at the same time. So you may have a CDFI in your community. So if you're curious to find that, you can actually go to the cdfifund.gov, and they actually have a certified list. It's an Excel spreadsheet. So you can search by the type of the type of CDFI. You can type in to see if it's a native CDFI or not. You can find what's located in your state. So it's a pretty easy tool to utilize. So if you're looking at resource connecting, partnership building, that's a good way to start. So with the CDFIs, there are different models that you can adapt within your native CDFI. A lot of native CDFIs are actually established through tribal credit departments or agencies. They can start up through economic development departments because it falls in line with that economic engine that you're creating within your tribal community, or sometimes even with Indian housing authorities. So it depends on the type of CDFI that you're going to create and the type of lending that you're going to do. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But generally, there are 4 CDFI structures, and each has a different business model and a legal structure. So there are community development banks, there are credit unions, there are venture capital funds, and there are loan funds. So this is the one that we're going to be primarily focusing on today. So a community development loan fund is they provide financing and development services to businesses, organizations, and individuals in low income or underserved communities. So a lot of our tribal communities generally fall into that category. So you can actually do different types of loan funds. So it can specialize even further. So you can do micro enterprise lending, small business, housing, and community service organizations. So each is defined by the client that you're serving. Through many of the loan funds, though many of the loan funds serve more than one type of client in a single financial institution, native CDFIs tend to be nonprofit and governed by board of directors with the community representation. So leading into that, there are a couple of different ways that a CDFI may be structured in your tribal community, and that could be possibly through a 501c3 or a 7871. You can also incorporate within your state or within the tribe itself. So it really depends on what the board is looking at or what that tribal department or tribe, how they want that structure to be created. So we're not going to go into the weeds into that breakdown, but definitely use this as a resource to discuss that further. One thing too is that you can also be a CDFI without having that U.S. Treasury certification tied to it. So if you're looking to become a certified CDFI, there's a set of criteria that you must meet with as an organization, submit application to the Treasury Fund, and then become certified. But you can actually still call yourself a CDFI without that certification. So it's like a criteria of about 6 or 7 pieces that you have to meet in order to do that. So what makes a native CDFI model unique? So with this, I love this native CDFI models because it really meets the need and demand within our communities. And who knows our communities best? It's us. Because we're there, we work with the client base, we know the cultural nuances to that community, and we know what's really needed, and we know how to really get folks into affordable capital. So the CDFI models create that affordable access to capital. So if you're looking at creating a small business owner or really stimulating and funding the entrepreneurs in your community, really look at this CDFI model. So when we look at the overall model, we're looking at the community, community economic development financing piece. Because we are a financial institution, majority of our services will be lending, but we also have that piece where we add the development services. And Tina actually talked deeply about how you can have those individual technical assistance pieces, really customizable to your community. That's what makes the model successful with a CDFI, because you have that financing piece, but you really have those deep supportive services to the lending product that you're offering. And we'll actually talk a little bit on the development services, but because you're a lending institution, that's going to be your primary role. Oops, sorry about that. But it also gives the native CDFI that flexibility to really create products unique to your market. And because you are a grassroots organization, you really know that need and demand within your community. So it gives you that flexibility to be creative and create products that maybe a big bank financial institution would not be able to do within your tribal community. It gives you the flexibility to also have lessened underwriting criteria. By that, I mean, you don't have the strict regimented underwriting that maybe you would have at a larger financial institution. So you're able to really spur economic development, economic growth, and create those small businesses and entrepreneurs within your community. So it's a really amazing model. And then, so I think this is a perfect lead in to hand it over to Flo, where she's going to talk a little bit about the different types of products that are available in a native CDFI.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Linnell. And my name is Florence Ledka, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Awista Corporation. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the different types of loan products that are offered at CDFIs. So we have like the 5 major ones, and I'm going to break those down and focus mostly on like the business ones that are available for entrepreneurs and established business. So there's consumer lending, and consumer lending could be a whole array of different things. It could be credit builder loans or debt consolidation loans. Many CDFIs also offer auto loans. And then as Tina mentioned, the pop-up businesses in Indian country, a lot of our native CDFIs across the country have established special consumer loans, like for fireworks. So during like the 4th of July and New Year's, a lot of native people do pop-up stands for fireworks. And so they do fireworks loans so that the entrepreneur is able to go out and buy all of the inventory that they need to get through the fireworks season, so that they're able to, supplement their income through that business that they're doing. Another thing that's really popular is Christmas loans. So almost like in the past, you've heard like some traditional banking did like Christmas clubs or Christmas banking, where people could save like an X amount of dollars per week, to have money at Christmas for gift buying. And this kind of works the opposite, where they actually do small loans for Christmas buying, and then they spread those payments out over the course of a year. So the payments every month are really low and affordable, and they're still able to meet those needs. So that's a kind of just a very brief discussion about the different types of consumer loans that CDFIs can offer. And then there's housing loans, housing lending. That's a really large up and coming area for native CDFIs. Some of the different types of loan products under housing are down payment assistance programs, home improvement loans, home equity loans, and then of course straight up mortgages. So a lot of our native communities are on trust land, and so that leads into situations with non-conforming mortgages and not being able to really get a mortgage from the traditional banks. So there's a lot of programs out there right now so that we are able to bring housing financing and mortgage financing into Indian country to meet the needs with those people who have non-conforming loans and are on trust land. And then agriculture is the other thing, and agriculture is kind of highlighted here along with business, and that's because agriculture is business in many instances, but we kind of separate out from traditional businesses or entrepreneurships that you would think, and have a separate branch for agriculture. And the reason we do that is because there's different types of funding available for agriculture loans and lending, or agriculture businesses. So With agriculture, it's really, the definition for ag is very broad. It could range anywhere from ranching operations to commercial fishermen, to, livestock. It can be just, a facility that does, sugar beets or corn or anything like that. So the term for agriculture, it could be tree farms as well. So the term agriculture is just very broad in this instance, and it can be used for a lot of different things. So some of the different types of loans you'll see under our agriculture lending are micro loans, development loans for agriculture, land loans for, to purchase acreage for either your ranching for livestock or for planting of, for vegetables and other things. And then we have also for operations. So it's wide ranging, and it can be used, all these different types of loans can be used for a lot of different things. Another kind of like a really unique program going on, and a lot of native CDFIs are adapting this in their ag programs, and that's a 4-H program. And that's for native youth so that they are able to purchase their livestock for their 4-H programs that they're involved in. And then pay that off over time in very small, low interest rate payments. So that's a really cool program that they've kind of created and came up with on their own, that you wouldn't be able to go to like a traditional bank and get that type of loan. So that's something really unique that native CDFIs can offer their communities. And then I want to focus on business loans, and there's several different types of business loans that are available, and they kind of all have a purpose or a different purpose. So one of the types of loans for under business is term loans, and that's for people who have really good credit and that you already have a really strong established business. And then, of course, as it's been mentioned previously in this webinar, is SBA lending. So there's several different types of loans available to us through the SBA. And that's for strong established businesses, but there's a long waiting time generally for that funding, and the due diligence process and the underwriting process is a little bit more intense than it would be from your native CDFI. And then there's business lines of credit. Those are normally met for short-term financing needs, and for somebody, a business owner or an entrepreneur who needs some flexibility and to be able to use the funds for several different things. There's also equipment loans. So that's so that you can buy equipment outright, whether that's for tractors or fishing boats, big commercial fishing boats or anything like that. And then there's personal loans. Personal loans are generally meant for startup businesses, and the owner has to have a really strong credit score in order to apply for those. And then, of course, there's business credit cards, and that's just, a business kind of line of credit or a business credit card to handle all of your ongoing business expenses. And then there's something called microloans. This is generally for startup loans, startup businesses that need just a small amount of financing to get them off the ground. And those are generally $50,000 and less. And then the other type of financing that's offered is invoice factoring or financing. And that's basically if you're a business and you have a lot of receivables, accounts receivable, so a lot of people owe you money, you're able to sell those receivables and get that money so that capital is constantly evolving. And then, of course, when your clients pay, they're paying the bank or the CDFI that you received that loan from. But at least you get that influx of capital so that you can continue to grow your business. So this was just for the sake of time, like a very quick kind of overview of the different types of loan products. And as Linnell said, we could really go in to a lot more detail and a lot more in-depth kind of discussion about this. But if you have any questions, we're of course available and can help you. And we can even guide you to a CDFI in your area if you have a need for one of these types of loans. And I'll pass it over to Heather now.
Thanks, Flo. So I'm Heather Rademacher-Taylor, Director of Programs over here at Owista Corporation. So I work closely with Linnell and Flo on a lot of our programmatic work. So I'm happy to be here today. And like both Linnell and Flo said, the CDFI model is unique. It really, the big takeaway is that, it pairs those development services with capital and reaches folks that are normally either unbanked or underbanked, and will kind of take kind of a more open minded view about kind of creditworthiness of the community and the folks that they're serving, so that they're reaching people that are, maybe not reached by traditional lending institutions. And so I love that Linnell kind of laid out, like, this is what makes it unique. These are the development services that you can pair, especially if you're serving your small businesses and entrepreneurs. And then Flo went through, these are the different lending products if you were CDFI and trying to serve entrepreneurs and small businesses in your community. And so kind of the next piece that we thought would be helpful to you if you're kind of considering this model as a way to serve the folks in your community, especially businesses, would be, okay, like, this is a great model. I like the development services. I like, being able to provide capital. How do I capitalize this entity, this model? How do I fund it? And so we really wanted to lay out some capitalization and resources too, to kind of let you know, like, this is how you would actually fund this work. So that being said, how do you capitalize your activities? What resources are out there? There is both investment and operational capital. For the lending that we've mentioned, you're predominantly going to be seeking investment capital because, you're in turn going to be lending those dollars out at a small percentage that then you're able to pay back to an investor. However, you can also provide not only direct lending capital to the small businesses you work with, but you can also pair those with grants, depending on if you pull those dollars in. That way you're able to provide equity to your borrowers as well. And there are also some lending sources of capital that you could pull in as a CDFI that are pure equity, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. And of course, the other form of funding that you could get as a CDFI are just straight grants that help you with your operations. And so just wanted to kind of highlight these key resources that a lot of native CDFIs are using. So really the predominant kind of source of capital for so many native CDFIs, especially folks getting off the ground like newer native CDFIs, is the CDFI fund under U.S. Department of Treasury. So they have a whole range of different kind of grant programs, from their bond guarantee program to new markets tax credits. But really the main program that they offer that native CDFIs are accessing would be their what we call their TA and their FA grants. So their TA grants are technical assistance awards, up to $150,000 over 2 years, and you can apply every year, and you're able to just use those for operations. You can access them before you're certified as a CDFI. So it's a great way to kind of like build that capacity and work towards certification. They also have, once you're certified, what they call their FA awards, which are financial assistance awards. And those are, you can use them in a couple different ways, but they're mainly meant to be used for lending capital. And you can ask for up to $1 million unless you have kind of like specific add-ons that they allow, depending on the program year. So you can ask for up to $1 million for over 3 years, and you can apply for that every year as well. And that is, it's a really unique source of capital because essentially it's just equity. So you might get that $1 million, you lend it out. And because it was a grant to you, once those loans are repaid, that just goes back to you on your books. And so you don't have to pay that back, which is a great resource, especially if you're trying to kind of revolve that capital out and serve even more entrepreneurs or small businesses. There are also resources for capital like Awista and other intermediaries. So like we mentioned, or like Linnell mentioned in our introduction, we lend to other native CDFIs. And there are other intermediaries out there. And so that's a source of capital that you could look at. We have a whole range of products, but we also have what we call our first in loans. And so a lot of times we might be the first capital or first investments for a lot of newer native CDFIs because our rates are very competitive. We'll do, loans over $1 million, but we also do those small loans to kind of get folks started that might be as small as like $50,000. And Flo, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's updated, because she knows our lending better than I do. But in the past, we have done loans as small as that to really seed those organizations and help them get started with their lending and get that first capital. Your tribe might be a great resource for capital. It really varies widely because we know the situation of tribes varies wildly in terms of the finances and what they're able to do or how those partnerships work out. Sometimes there's not as much connection, but sometimes there's a lot of integration between the tribe and the native CDFI in the community. And they can provide a lot of that capital. So one really good example of this would be Citizen Potawatomi CDC, Community Development Corporation out in Oklahoma. They have a wonderful relationship with their tribe, and they get a lot of funding from the tribe, in addition to a lot of other resources. There are foundations out there, and for the most part, you know, your foundations are going to provide that operational capital I mentioned so that you can run your organization, run the CDFI. But there are a couple of foundations that also will provide, again, that equity lending capital. So they'll give you a grant that's, you know, maybe you get $300,000 for your CDFI, $200,000 is, you know, for your operations, and $100,000 is for your lending. Again, that lending, since it's a grant, you're able to lend it out, it gets repaid, and then that goes back onto your books and you're able to kind of revolve that money. So that's really great funding if you can get it. So some foundations will do that, but for the most part, they'll probably give you operational money. Then there are impact investors and investment companies out there. And so once you feel more comfortable taking on debt and you're kind of growing your native CDFI and trying to bring in more lending dollars for your small businesses and entrepreneurs, you might be working with impact investors that are looking at not maximizing their return, so to speak. They do want a return, they do want to be paid back with some sort of interest, but they're not looking to maximize that. So they're a good option because they'll probably have lower interest rates, and that's going to be good for you because then you're able to offer lower interest rates to your clients as well. There are corporations out there that also do investment in native CDFIs. There are also native-owned banks and credit unions. And so we'd want to highlight those as great resources. So Bank of Cherokee County is out there. Native American Bank also is a native-owned bank that could be a good resource. Bay Bank, I believe they're up in Michigan or Wisconsin, and others. And then there are national banks. They're a great source of funding, both operational and potentially like lending capital that you could get. So Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Capital One. But, and in addition to national banks, it's always worthwhile to partner with your community banks and regional banks. They'll usually have a lot of localized programs that you can access. And so those partnerships are going to be huge, both because you could bring in capital, you know, for your native CDFI in one way or another. But you can also partner with them on different programmatic endeavors. And you might be able to partner with them on providing your development services, or let's say you're only focusing on small business lending because that's, you know, that's what you want to focus on. That's the purpose and mission of your organization. But, you know, you're really working with a client, their business is going well, and they're talking to you about housing or other needs they might have. And so because you may have built up a nice partnership, maybe with a national bank or a community or regional bank, you're able to then maybe refer them to that bank, and you've worked with them and built that borrower up, and they have a great background, which is going to make them a desirable lending candidate to that bank. And then there are a ton of federal agencies and programs out there that support native CDFIs and their lending and operations. So both types of capital, and specifically small business, entrepreneurship kind of programs, job creation, that kind of thing. So you have the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Agriculture's rural development arm. You've got the U.S. Small Business Administration, which you've heard us mention, and Tina mentioned. You've got Department of Interior has some programs, the Economic Development Administration, and like we mentioned, the CDFI fund as well. And then there are other federal agencies and programs, but those are the ones that we mainly see and that we've accessed ourselves. And then there are also state economic development departments and councils. And I say that because they kind of reframe how they kind of name themselves depending on what state you're in. But depending on your state, like they're a great resource too. And so these are all a lot of really, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but this is a lot of really good resources as you're looking to maybe approach this model and think about like, okay, well, how would I fund it? How would I get lending capital? How would I serve my entrepreneurs in this way? And then in terms of resources, there are also resources for you as a CDFI to kind of also support your operations and capacity building. And so there are native and non-native resources, of course, and they can provide training and technical assistance to you and your team as you're kind of getting off the ground. And so some of those might be OISTA, we do that work. There's also Native CDFI Network. There's NAFOA, so that's Native American Financial Officers Association. There's National Congress of American Indians. There's OFN, which is Opportunity Finance Network. They're essentially the kind of membership organization for CDFIs kind of more broadly across the country. We're a member of OFN. We're also a member of Native CDFI Network. And then other Native CDFIs, they're 100% your resources. They might share templates with you or tap in to help you do a training or give you feedback or give you different programmatic ideas or lending ideas. And so those are always resources that you have as a CDFI. And there might be others out there too. Like I said, this list isn't exhaustive, but we just really wanted to give you an idea. If you wanted to start this, it's a very exciting model. It's a very useful model for your community. But there's also a lot out there to support that model too. So that being said, I think this kind of flows nicely into maybe some of the financial considerations that you would want to make as kind of a next step. And so with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Flo again.
Thank you, Heather. So a lot of these financial considerations are really dependent in broadly stated terms on your business plan and your sustainability plan that you have for your organization. And that really applies to whether you're a Native CDFI or a small business. Another thing that's super important that kind of drives these things is your strategic plan and any kind of operational planning that you do. So just to kind of re-emphasize that, policies, like any of the policies that you have and you develop for your organization is going to kind of feed into these things and kind of determine where you lie with some of these decisions that you have to make in regards to this. So, and I'm sure that a lot of Tina's classes that she does, her entrepreneurship classes that she does, kind of talks and goes into much in-depth conversations about all of these things that I'm going to mention. But just some of the things to keep in mind are whenever you're searching for capital, and this goes to whether you're a native CDFI or a small business, or even a large business for that, you're always going to look for low interest and long-term capital. So you're always going to want to shop around because there's going to be different deals on loans and different types of loans from different banks, different CDFIs, different federal branches where they do lending and things like that. So you're always going to want to have that kind of always in the back of your mind. You're seeking, the lowest interest, longest term capital that you can get. Also, you want to, if you are a Native CDFI or do any type of lending, you want to make sure that your lending capital matches your loan product offerings. So this again kind of goes back to your policies, and so you would have a loan policy and you would have a capitalization policy that you followed, but that's like the main crux of those policies and what you want to accomplish. You just want to make sure that whatever capital you get matches your loan product offerings and those terms. And to give you an example of that is that if you only have one loan product and it has a 10-year term on it, but you only have 2-year or 3-year lending capital, that doesn't match. So that means that you're going to have to pay back your lending capital before you get any of your money coming back in from the loan that you did. So that's really important to make sure that you have a spreadsheet for that and that you're always tracking that and making sure that cash flow for both interest receivable and interest payable, as well as principal receivable and principal payable, that those match and that there's positive, in some instances, hopefully positive cash flow for you there. And that this kind of goes into my third point, and that is you want to make sure your interest rate spread on loans receivable versus your notes payable is actually adding something to your bottom line. So in some instances, you might have a particular product or a special loan that you did where you really don't have a ROI, a return on investment. But in general, especially if you're native CDFI, you are in business to make loans and to make a profit on those loans. So you want to make sure that you have some spread. So it kind of goes back to number one, where you want to make sure you get the lowest interest possible capital, and then that it matches the terms of that capital matches your loan product offering. So that helps you basically determine your spread and figure out what that should be. And then if you are a native CDFI, we're really heavily focused on self-sufficiency. And so that revolves around our earned income. So we get our earned income from, of course, interest revenue, and then development services. And so the whole goal there would be that you would be able to be self-sufficient as an organization and to be sustainable without grant money. So that's something to a financial consideration to keep in mind when you're not only developing your processes and your policies, but also when you're doing your strategic planning and your sustainability planning, because that all feeds into those top three items here. And then cash flow is number 5 here. So, and I've talked about cash flow in almost in the top 3 items there, but it's really important that you have positive cash flow. And if you don't have positive cash flow, you want to make sure you have, a reserve set aside for operations, just in case you do have a period of time with negative cash flow. Sometimes that happens while you're waiting on grants, or if you are a small business, if you're waiting on your receivables to come in, sometimes your cash doesn't come in as you need to pay for expenses or other payables. Another really important thing to always keep note of and to always monitor is your unrestricted net assets, or your owner's equity if you are a small business. So your unrestricted net assets is normally combined with your restricted net assets. And basically what that means is unrestricted net assets can be used for whatever the organization deems necessary. And restricted net assets means that there's assets, whether that be cash or receivables or anything else that's on your balance sheet that is restricted for a specific purpose. And that could be lending capital. It could be programmatic in nature. It could be for specific development services that you have to deliver and haven't done yet, or just a whole array of things. And that is always determined by the funder that you receive that funding from. But unrestricted net assets is most important, and that is because that really kind of tells people the net worth of the organization and how strong the organization is. That number is also used in several ratios that is determined, that is used to determine financial strength of the organization. And that's important, not only when you're applying for grants in the case of a CDFI, but also when you're trying to attract funders. And then of course there's KPIs and MPIs. KPI are key performance indicators, and MPIs are minimum performance indicators. So in every organization or in every industry, there are certain KPIs that people are looking at and MPIs that your investors are looking at. So you want to be conscious and aware of what those are and make sure that they're meeting those minimum prudent standards, because that's what your funders are going to look at. That's what bankers are going to look at if you're applying for a loan or applying for applying for funding. And then your grantors are also going to look and make sure that you're meeting those minimum prudent standards for the particular industry that you happen to be in or that you're serving. So one of the things I wanted to emphasize here at the very end is that this was really kind of heavily focused on CDFI industries. And so most of the things that we've talked about can also be applied to, small businesses or even large businesses. So you always just want to be, aware of any, financial or capitalization resources you have, regardless of whether you're a for-profit business or a nonprofit CDFI. And the same for these financial considerations, they would all be the same. The only thing that's different is the terminology. So, for example, self-sufficiency, that's what it is when you're a nonprofit org, but earned income or revenue is what it's called when you're a for-profit business. And just like unrestricted net assets, that's just the same terminology for owner's equity if you were a for-profit business or equity. So I just wanted to kind of explain that a little bit further, because I know that there might be some people on here who are perhaps interested in starting a CDFI, but there's also some entrepreneurs on here. And so I just wanted to explain that this relates to both things, the CDFIs and businesses. It's just the terminology for what we're discussing is perhaps somewhat different depending on what organization structure you're referring to. And then I will turn it back over to Linnell.
Thanks, Flo. Thanks, Heather. And I just want to pause here and give a few minutes if there are any questions for any of us, myself, Heather, or Flo, on our presentation. And you can do that either via the chat or you can unmute yourself.
I had one.
Hi there, great. Oh,
Sorry, Ann.
great presentation and lots of information. Glad we're going to get the slides later. I'm just curious, your main office is in Longmont, Colorado. How far does OISTA provide loans? Is it national or is it locally within Colorado?
Yeah, we are a national organization. So we lend, we're an intermediary, so we don't do direct lending at this time, but we do national lending all across the United States, Hawaii, and Alaska. And we focus on native CDFIs, but we also loan to tribal enterprises and other native owned or native run enterprises.
I had a quick question. This is Tina. When you said for funding for CDFIs, before you become a CDFI, you're eligible for $150,000. I didn't catch. Was that over 2 years or 1 year?
Yeah, that's over 2 years, but you can apply every year. So the funding overlaps for those CDFI fund NACA TA awards. And NACA is just Native American CDFI Assistance TA awards for the 150,000 you mentioned.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Greetings, Steve Craddock, Quinnawapanug on the East Coast. I joined late, but a great presentation. I did have a question. I think it's a challenge, generally speaking, and I'm on a learning curve regarding some CDFI and some native lending. Is there a challenge around the amount of capital you can access, and is that increasing? I've read and I've heard that typically creates some constraints for lending within Indian country and CDFI in terms of the amount of capital you can truly access.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's the whole reason we really have native CDFIs, and that is because the access to capital is extremely limited all across Indian country. So that's part of OISTA's mission, and that is to bring as much capital as we possibly can into Indian country. To give you an example of that, we just recently launched a $25 million COVID response and resiliency capital pool fund, where we're dispersing $25 million in the next 9 months all across the United States to native CDFIs to then be able to do economic development in their communities.
Thank you.
And Darlene, the presentation is recorded, so Rebecca didn't get a chance to get back to you. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat. There's no appendages raised. There are no unmuting, so I think we are good, but definitely we'll drop our contact information in the chat box, and I think Rebecca will be sending
Oh, Linnell may have frozen. I
this,
thought
so thank you.
so. Yeah, like she said,
Awesome.
we'll drop those
Yeah.
emails in the chat too.
Perfect. And I did make a note because I know a lot of these presentations, great information, but it can be a lot. So a resource document will also be shared at the end of the presentation. Give me a couple of days in terms of editing the recording of the video, but it will also, that will be emailed out to all attendees. It will also include the contact information for everyone on that's presenting and speaking this morning. We will conclude our session this morning. We have just one final presentation from our friends with the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, Akwesasne, from upstate New York. If you're not familiar with, about 2 years ago, USET established and had its first meeting of what we called the Best Practices Conference, mainly through our tribal health program support. And as staff, we were really excited about this opportunity, but then the attendees also got a lot out of the time of a training instead of sitting at that point in a traditional classroom setting where you have, subject matter expert, educating out to a class, that it was really beneficial to hear from actual tribal programs and tribal managers of how they implement and how they operate their activities. So we kind of wanted to carry that tradition and carry that best practice as well into the session today. So that's where we asked Mr. James Lazore and Ed Smoke from the Economic Development Department at the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe to come and share about their Tribal Business Assistance Program. So with that, I will kick it over to James or Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Awesome.
Share my screen here in a second. I think it's still under Linnell's screen.
Yeah. Linnell, could you stop sharing the screen?
I think I got it. Okay. I believe Ed is there. Ed is my colleague at the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, and we are asked to basically give an overview of our small business relief program, which we instituted as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Under our situation is maybe not as unique to that. We were put under a stay-at-home order in April of 2020. However, a lot of the impact started in March of 2020, much like others. And what we were posed to do under a office layoff, obviously at that point, the ins and outs were being sorted out for non-essential staff, and particularly from our office, myself and others, with the exception of Ed, we were laid off temporarily for a month. Ed is the business services specialist, and he's a great resource within our office on economic development and business development. I'm the director for St. Regis Mohawk Tribe's Economic Development Office. And we can start with that review. I just wanted to highlight a connection to Owista Corporation for Linnell, Heather, and Flo, is that their Owista and Mohawk actually means money. And we're familiar with the term, and it's interesting that the organization is named Money.
James, this is Tina. If you do a new share, because you're sharing like the outline, if you do a new share to the other screen, it'll show the presentation. You have to do it in the Zoom part. So when you shared your screen, you can share your screen, but then go back to that where it says new share, and it'll show you like if you have two screens, you probably have two screens because it's showing the presentation part, just so you know. Only because I do this every day and I figured it out. Sorry.
No problem. Is that you guys see the
That's
agenda?
better. That's way better. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks. So just to touch on what we're going to be covering today in the Small Business Relief Program, we had a scope that was laid out at the start by the Tribal Council to put together a relief program that would help our local businesses. Obviously, they were impacted immediately by the pandemic, and we were obviously mandated with our associates in the compliance department. So for us in our tribe, the compliance department is responsible for issuing doing business as certificates, in which we collaborate and input any new businesses or existing businesses into our small business directory. So it was important that we got to share and cross evaluate some applications for this relief program. Touch very quickly, I think majority of people on the call today might be familiar with the legislation that the CARES Act provided. We also had some pretty important deliverables to determine community parameters. We are unique, and Ed can testify a little bit further about that. We are upstate New York, and we are also straddling the border of US and Canada. And our community is one community. However, we do have borders that intersect our community. So there was obviously specifics that we had to keep. However, making it as quick and efficient to be delivered. Ultimately, in that picture, we had to outline a few pieces that would fit for this particular type of funding and eligible businesses for a one-time grant. Okay, agenda, just a couple other points we're going to touch on. What did success have before we created it? We're trying to create something that was fair, realistic, and reasonable. We had a variety of businesses, so we had to put a bucket, if you will, of businesses that would be eligible for relief, trying to catch as many as we can in our net without leaving some of our more notable and reliant businesses on our service. So we touched base of gas station, convenience stores, restaurants, and bars. Artists, crafts, and culture was a big piece to it that we didn't want to leave out because we have a strong reigniting of an industry in our community for cultural tourism. We kind of lumped a group of professional services, which would include retail, auto service, accommodations. That was kind of our biggest and largest group that we were trying to address and support with this relief fund. We're going to touch a bit more on that part-time businesses. These definitely individuals that had some artists or catering jobs that were completely shut down for the year. And if you will, that was their side hustle and was completely interrupted by COVID restrictions. We also have a unique large enterprise pool, which consists of some of the franchises on reserve. Some of these larger employers employ 100+ employees overall and have multiple types of businesses, storefronts. So we definitely wanted to make sure we got support to them. Ed and I will touch on the statistics, what kind of results we saw from the relief fund. In our project schedule, I mean, this was go, go, go from the start and didn't end until the end of the year last year. Okay. Just, I mean, this could be quick and easy, is that the CARES Act was issued, approximately $8 billion for tribes. We were pretty thorough in explaining this to our community. We had numerous press releases, our communications department had Facebook posts to highlight where the support was coming from. And obviously that there would have to be some restrictions to who would be able to access and be eligible for that fund. Along with the executive director's office and the compliance office, we were on our local radio as well to give an explanation of what the CARES Act itself meant. Obviously, we try to make eligibility very broad, but very focused for the reasoning of the CARES Act. Eligible businesses that had to be owned by tribal members, physically located on the southern portion. We call it the southern portion, which is the US portion of our reserve, and in operation prior to April 7th. We use that date that they would at least have been in operation for 1 year to get relief from this fund. I think we do know that there were some businesses that started after that period, and we did our best. We will be looking at them from our office, how much more support we can get to them, being that they've now graduated, and any future relief support we can get, they would now be eligible. Okay, I think I'm going to hand it over to Ed.
Okay, let me unmute myself since I had a quick phone call. So yeah, as everybody kind of knows that with the PPP came out, and last year in April, we were getting a lot of information about it. We were fielding a lot of calls about it. But the tribe, ourselves, recognized, the council recognized that a lot of our businesses weren't going to be eligible for that. So through the CARES Act and funding able to be set aside, we had to say, how can we reach our businesses? And I've been, cross country and stuff like that. And within our community, we have a very entrepreneurial spirit. The 95% of all businesses are owned by individuals, not by the tribal council. And that goes way back. So we knew we had to reach out to a lot of people. Plus, we have a business directory that we work with our Canadian counterparts, our Mohawk Council of Akwesasne counterparts. So we knew there was going to be a lot of people to reach. And in the end, we did end up with 3 overall rounds, as we called it, because you reach out to somebody and then 2 weeks later, they're like, I didn't hear about it. We even had situations where within the family, one sister received funding and then the other sister didn't hear about it. And like, well, some people have to talk to each other, because that's, not everybody listens to our local radio station. Too much country for me. I don't listen to it. Not everybody reads the paper and stuff. But in the end, we sent out and then received back 365 applications, businesses within and again, remember, our community is very different in terms of part of our community is in Quebec, Canada, part of our community is in Ontario, Canada, and the part that we deal with mostly is in the southern side of Akwesasne, or south side of Akwesasne, in New York State, jurisdictionally, in the United States. Even within my family and Jim's family, 2 of my kids were born in Canada. 1 was born in Messina, New York. My mom's backyard's in Quebec. Welcome to Akwesasne. It's very complicated, as we say. So we also were given, there are set guidelines from tribal council in terms of, whereas we would love to help everybody, there's still some federal funding requirements. If there's a Canadian address, or why are we assisting businesses over there? But in the end, we were able to help with 314 recipients of what we call the small business relief. Over $2 million in relief funds. We talked about our DBA, and that was one of the things we first talking with the compliance department who handles the DBAs was, at the first glance, it was like, okay, so anybody who has DBA, we're going to reach out to them. But in our department, we deal with a lot of vendors, a lot of caterers, a lot of people that really, they got the side hustle, they got the side business, but they don't go for the DBA because it's not necessarily a requirement. However, some businesses do. So we did put on the application, who does have a DBA, just for more statistical purposes than anything. We did identify that 22% had a DBA. In the end, as we looked at who's owning a business, it did require that the businesses had to be 51% owned by a Mohawk tribal member, and it had to have a tribal ID because we have people within our community that are from off territory or from other territories. So that was a requirement, having the tribal band number for the Severance Mohawk tribe. So some of the statistics that came back again was 55% were identified as women owned. So that's a great percentage of women owned. We had 83% were sole proprietors, 13% were partnerships, and like any application, sometimes you don't get a response. So we had 4% of that. Home-based, a very sturdy home-based businesses within our territory, 53%, and 47% were non-based, non-home-based, including retail storefronts, or or they might be a small contractor. They do renovations or they do work at somebody else's home. They're not home-based. We did have, as we look at a lot of part-time businesses, a lot of smaller businesses in general, comparison to the overall numbers, we had 66% closed due to restrictions. Some were a bar, we have some bars in the territory that had to close. It was mandated. 34% were able to remain open. And again, talking about some businesses, if they have to go into a home, they couldn't do it anymore. Even with landscaping, people were scared. We don't want you on my property, unfortunately. Now, again, with a lot of our businesses, we're saying the PPP is out there, EIDL is out there. You should apply. And when they go and talk to the bank says, okay, let's give us your past 2 years of payroll tax, or or IRS forms. And a lot of our businesses are like, hold on there, don't want to do that. So 93% out of all our businesses did not apply. We did have some that did apply. Out of those group, 76 were approved for PPP out of the 7% that did apply and were able to apply. And then 24% said we never heard back from anybody. And we even had a lot of where some banks, local banks, smaller banks, were saying, oh, you're just coming to us now, but you want to apply for the PPP. Well, we're dealing with our own clients that we have in our system already. They have information on them. So some people had the door shut on them even. Jim mentioned we do have some large enterprises. There's 3 of them that we identified. And again, they have the higher number they have multiple businesses, so they have a higher number of employees. They also have some franchises involved. We have Tim Hortons, Papa John's on the territory, Dunkin' Donuts on the territory, under some of these larger businesses. And those 3 account for 38 businesses within the territory. And they accounted for 12% of all the recipients for the businesses that received assistance. Jim? Next slide. So this is a breakdown of both employment information for employees laid off, as well as the overall businesses in the different rounds, R1, round 1, R2. And what we found is that what we needed to do was, even though we set a certain time and we had to react quickly because people were suffering right off the bat, like Jim said, the emergency order for Akwesasne was back in March. When council finally received CARES Act funding that was in place to be able to issue assistance, it probably wasn't until July, so we're talking a lack of income for a lot of these small businesses. And as everybody knows, some of those businesses, they're even working paycheck to paycheck. And within locally, when they do a contract, and if they do it with somebody that says, okay, we'll pay you in 30 days, they're like, oh man, it's hard on them, right? So 3 months later, and there's no assistance either at a federal level, state level, because they don't do the taxes or tax forms, or even a local level, that hurt a lot of our businesses. So we found out that once we got some of the information back, that where we had about 800 people employed through businesses here, and this is not even the tribal council. The administration employs about, I believe we said we received 750 employees through the tribe, Jim?
Yeah, so what we had took a look at was 653 full-time employees, 40 part-time, 27 per diems. That's significant amount of government employees, and then laid off after April were 434 full-time employees, 20 part-time, 17 per diems. Gaming operations were 750 pre-COVID, approximately. They closed in March of 2020, reopened with limited capacity only in August of 2020.
So you're looking at, at quite a big impact, because now people are not receiving that solid paycheck that they had. They might have went on unemployment. They're not shopping locally. They're not shopping in other towns, because also there's a travel restriction going on. So we see where there was, percentage of laid off, 40.89% in the, that first round of what we call, when we see applications. So that's quite a big chunk, people that are not able to lay off or be employed at the time. And round two, we see 60% of those businesses. Again, that's stretching into August. And then our final round was up through December of full-time, part-time, and then laid off of about 83 additional employees. So for our businesses in round one, that we had 142 businesses that we were able to contact. 63 remained open, 64 closed, 16 did reopen, and then we had 21 different businesses that just didn't reopen, including one of our, they closed shop. It was a restaurant plus pizza parlor. Our restaurant bar, I should say, but the bar itself is closed down. We had a jewelry shop locally that had to close down and has not reopened. Some other smaller businesses, retail shops that have closed down and just not reopened. On the other hand, it's not all dire, because as we've been working in the past few months, we've also had some small businesses that are looking to reopen, not just reopen, but to start. So it's been great to see some local entrepreneurship spirit, still ready. And they're like, no matter what's going on, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to get involved with. So we look at, in round two, we had 96 businesses that we were able to reach. And again, even if they closed, because they were in operation as part of one of the requirements from March of 2019 to March of 2020, if they were in business, but then because of the order had to close, they were still eligible for our program. So we weren't shutting the doors. If they weren't open, that's all right. We knew that they had been operating for that previous year. We were going to assist them and hopefully get them back on their feet. But they did have to show some activity. We had a few, we had businesses, as we talked, to say, wait a minute, where'd these guys come from? Or where'd this business come from? And they may have started it years ago, but then said, oh, well, I want to have access to this funding. Well, no, you didn't have any business activity. We did have some parameters in there. We didn't just want people raising their hand and saying, oh, I went and got my DBA, see, I'm open. Well, you weren't open for that prior year. Unfortunately, we had set some limits, and they had to be in business. So if they just opened in January of 2020, and the order did affect them, unfortunately, they hadn't been in business for that 1 year activity. In round three, I'll jump to that. 74 businesses we were able to reach out to. 53 businesses remained open. And again, these are some businesses that heard about it and came to us and said, yeah, I'm still here. Still, they have their hand raised. 21 did close that we talked to. Again, even if they close, that's fine. 6 reopened, but 7 remain closed. Now, again, as Jim mentioned before, some of these businesses have remained closed, but they're itching to get back going. We still have some orders out there, some to not gather. So you've got caterers that may be doing that. You have people, cultural teachers, who can't teach in the schools because they just not allowed in, right? Schools are up and down. My daughter's going through university class. She's been home for a year, and hopefully in fall, she'll be able to go back to school. But locally, we have a lot of our local schools bring in those teachers. They bring in cultural teachings. They bring in singers. They bring in people that do crafts with them. And a lot of those crafts people that were doing workshops, they still are not able to do it due to the restrictions. Okay, Jim?
So just to tie that in with what Ed is mentioning, yeah, we had set parameters for the small business relief. However, we kind of took a look at the project at the beginning with Tribal Council in terms of response to the community. However, getting as much help as we can to those that are in need of it, but we also tasked with making sure, unfortunately, somebody who's not doesn't really require the relief, or maybe not have a, we had to draw a line in the sand, obviously, to ensure that we were getting help to the people that needed it. Overall, tribal council is responsible for the welfare and safety of its members. This was an immediate fit to what we saw would make it successful. Our programs are designed to look at a service-oriented approach. So we were primarily tasked with delivering as much as we knew about our small business community. And I can also reiterate this point, our local business directory had total under 300 businesses registered in it. And with all the rounds of relief announced to the community, we were able to see 365 businesses from the southern portion only. So that's an indication. Definitely, there are some of those businesses that were not as well known, or maybe conducting a lot of business online or side hustle again. But we did have a thorough process in which we evaluated among the three main criteria, as well as presenting it to tribal council as the overall budget constraints. So this was only limited to the CARES Act funds, and it's communicated that way to the community that if there is anything in terms of relief funds, the tribe itself does not have set aside funds that would permit this. So this was one time. Our immediate rush to get some relief out there, and one of the first rounds, I believe, concluded at the end of August, summer of 2020. At that time, we had only information that the program had to expend its funds by December of 2020. So we did as many of the relief fund rounds, and we had 3 in total to get help to local businesses. And much of the reach out to the community, like I had mentioned, this was a very challenging time, no matter what communication channel we used. Still, some individuals needed more support and more announcements to be heard. That's why we were anticipating the third round, maybe a couple dozen more businesses that would reach out for assistance, because we did not ask for them to apply again from the existing rounds. We said, all right, this third round would only apply to people who have not gotten any help. And we ended up seeing 80 plus applications, and we helped 74 in the final round. Here, and
So again, this is just a recap. You know, we had 156 applications that we knew of in that first round, sent them out. We did the first and second round also by both physical and emails. And then the third round we actually did with Adobe Sign, where we sent out electronic versions. And we still, you know, not everybody has a computer and understands Adobe Sign and what they have to sign, but we worked with them. You know, they could come or talk to us through the phone, and we could walk them through it. And then in the first round, we did that first round. I received applications in the office. We had people drop stuff off, you know, in the mailbox and everything. The second round, 122 applications were sent out as people raised their hand and said, hey, I need one. 98 we received. We still had some ineligible ones in all the rounds. And then 87 applications. So 365 applications that were actually sent out. Again, we sent out applications and then never received or heard back from the person for whatever reason. 314 again received it. So here's the categories that we utilize. And again, in the first round, second round, third round, we have, and again, when we see restaurants, we have more restaurants than that, but there's also the large enterprises also have restaurants within there. So they were under that umbrella. So while you see large enterprises 3, and you think, Akwesasne's pretty big, why do they only have 5 restaurants? Well, some of those restaurants are covered in the large enterprises umbrella organization. They have several, you know, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but they cover a pretty good amount of restaurants. Gas and convenience stores, again, could be a standalone convenience store and don't have gas. You had 10 of those. Artists and culture. Now, these numbers were actually a little bit surprising that first round. We were like, why are a lot of our artists and culture? We have a lot of people like that. That's why it almost doubled in the second round and continued on the third round. But that was more of also a full-time position where that's their main business, right? And that's where they provide for their family and everything. Now, we also had people that do that of artists and culture on the part-time business. So some of those are captured in the numbers down below where you see the part-time. So it's combined, we have quite a few businesses that are structured or that are considered artists and culture. And then retail and professional, we kind of put together a category. The retail stores, of course, kind of speak for themselves. They have an actual storefront. And then professional businesses are anything that's a full-time business, but maybe they're a massage therapist and they go to homes. They don't necessarily have it. They could be the electricians or the contractors. They don't have a retail spot, but they work from their home. They go and tear apart your kitchen and put it back together. So that's one of our bigger categories there. And again, we covered large enterprises. So that's kind of the breakdown for who we deal with here within Akwesasne. And again, just to reiterate that this is on the south side of Akwesasne. We don't have the numbers for the Canadian businesses. And I should say that we do have businesses that have physical locations on both sides of the border. So they do contracts for Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, which is the northern tribal council, if you want to call it. And then they also have, and we took that into consideration that they may live on the so-called Canadian side or north side of Akwesasne, but they also had garages or retail shops or some other physical location on the southern side. So we made sure that we assisted them as well.
I think I just want to interject here. It's a continuation of the stats of the relief fund. Back in November, we were set an internal deadline with tribal council that if there was not an extension to expend the funds into the new year, which we got in late December actually, is internally we would need a deadline in November to determine if we were going to do a final round. In that discussion, we also had how much more relief can we provide to those existing businesses, and we were able to find some more funds to allocate to them. This what prompted that final round discussion and why we're able to find additional 74 more businesses to get relief to. That was our discussion internally, and I think it's something to be noted. Tribal Council obviously showing their dedication and support to the business community, also had restrictions related to the funding. Just move to the next one. So we kind of worked inside these windows to all along to move fast, communicate, launch an application form at the beginning. That started back in June. We put out applications starting July 10th, and we closed them within 2 weeks from that date. Ultimately, we got the first relief checks out in August. Second round, it was go, and realizing that there was still some funds available. That's why we pushed to get more relief funds out in September. This whole process was discussed and collaborated with other departments under the tribe, and it's testimony of teamwork and support amongst each other, considering the times and the uncertainty. And I think it's really a good high point in terms of organizational capacity that we could move so quickly, among other programs that were running under the tribe at the time. I'll get to the next slide here. Ed? Did you want to?
Yeah, again, so the compliance department handles the businesses that want to be issued a doing business as certificate. And again, we didn't want to restrict it to just those businesses because we would have left out a lot. And these numbers kind of show that as they applied, out of 142 businesses in that first round, 37 will only add DBAs. And we're going to restructure our application because we had some people in the beginning that are like, well, I thought I had to have a DBA. No, it says it right on the application or even within the letter we sent out, but somebody hears, oh, I can get a grant. They don't always read the details, right? But it breaks down and the DBA has its advantages, and that's where we recognize that maybe we want to work with our own local businesses to say, and it's good for them, because if they can open up a bank account, it helps them to separate out. And Tina will will attest to this, is that you want to separate out that business money from your own personal money so that you get a better understanding of what is coming in for the business, or am I using my own, if it's a side hustle, am I using my paycheck to keep my business going that I really love, but maybe it's costing me money. So the DBAs help us. One of our local banks is real familiar with it. They'll get you a business account and get started. Plus, when you deal with wholesalers, right? So in the end, we had about 68 businesses that did have DBA, and then the majority are without the DBA. But we, from that, talking with Jim, we definitely want to work with people to hopefully get them to utilize the DBA. Okay.
No. So another highlight to what this overall presentation was provided to our community back in January to show them the results. And definitely this is a strong point to a number of administrative benefits and other possible grant opportunities for women-owned businesses. And I think that was the intention of raising it with the community, that this is who's really leading and owning our businesses is majority that are woman-owned. And in that picture, I think we're definitely going to ensure that our programming reflects how to get more access to those owners within New York State, and maybe other states are similar to this, that they have certain certifications that would permit them access to certain state contracts because they are woman-owned. And then globally, federally wide, there's the MWBE, which would provide them benefit or maybe even additional considerations for contracts and projects. The closing up here on the overall picture I wanted to highlight was the large enterprises did impact our overall relief funding. Obviously, we wanted to get them support. However, I bring up this slide to highlight that they counted for 38 total businesses. However, because they're non-home based, they established storefronts. Each of these families have made significant investments into our community. And I think that's what really highlighted that. They pulled the overall average of all the businesses, particularly from the 61% average without the large enterprises accounted for. It pulled the whole average to 53% home-based, 47% non-home-based. Because of their involvement with this relief program, we did spend a considerable amount of time consulting with them. What were they seeing? What kind of trends we could share with smaller businesses? And I think it was a great resource to our office, our team, and something we could share globally with the business community. This should be it. Yeah. In summary, we're just highlighting that we were able to support 314 businesses of small business relief. And it was, success on a number of levels. However, there was those instances that we do look for improvement if there is a scenario that permits us to run it again. However, globally, there's definitely a lot of data we gathered. We supported a end of business relief survey from each of those recipients to gather more qualitative and quantitative data on what they were seeing in the pandemic, and definitely what they were hoping that our office could assist them with. And I think we got numerous pieces that help us with that, and we will continue to collaborate them. In closing, that's it. Nyalgoa, our entire team, as well as the tribe's other compliance team, finance, and executive directors team. That's it, Rebecca. Thank you for letting us share.
Great. Thank you for sharing the great work that and the amount of work it's taken to really get something like that up very soon, very nimble, having to get that started pretty soon in order to meet those funding deadlines, but great success. And thank you for sharing today. I just wanted to, as follow-up, Mado, thank you to everyone for taking time out of your morning today to be with us. I apologize this morning for the technical difficulties. we'll work to make sure that gets addressed and remedied before the next event. So make sure on that. I did just want to take a quick time to say thank you and to acknowledge our USET Board of Director, Chairwoman Melissa Darden. Darden is on the line with us. Thank you for joining us, and any other elected tribal leaders. I want to say thank you to Chairman, Councilman Stephen Craddock. Thank you for joining today, and I just wanted to give a special shout out. As we have this rest of the time, as folks are available, I know it's been a very long morning and a lot of information thrown at you, but we wanted to have this time for question and answers for all the panelists, to give you some time to start thinking about some questions. And then I also would like to task all of our presenters and speakers to start thinking of a call to action or just a couple words that you would just like to leave the participants on the line. I wanted to share one opportunity with y'all while you're sort of marinating and starting to think about either your question or your call to action. And this is a brand new professional development opportunity. Well, first, this is I'll make sure in the notes from today, this was a schedule called yesterday from the American Rescue Plan on the Small Business Credit Initiative. I am still learning about this program as well, but I will make sure that the notes and this is a PDF of the slides that gets shared out today, or with the other notes for the session. It might be here within the next couple of days, but I think it has some really good resources and very timely resources as it relates to the American Rescue Plan. I wanted to share, if I can move, there we go. Nope. Should have done better with this. Here we go. This is a link to the International Economic Development Council, IEDC. They just rolled out a brand new professional certification on entrepreneurship-led economic development. This is a certified accreditation. If you or your staff or program would like to learn more, it is a series of classes and then a accreditation test. So these are some of the classes that are part. There are these core classes and then elective classes, but you can see it's on accelerating growth, credit analysis, strategies, finance programs, technology-led economic development. I am just sharing this for information. For information, there is a fee attached to it, and I just want to say USET is not condoning or support that. Just wanted to share it for information purposes if that's something that you and your program would be interested in. The International Economic Development Council also has a wide list of free webinars and training sessions if you might be interested, and I will include that URL in the notes from this morning as well. So with that, and sort of conclude, are there any questions that is for myself or for our speakers? Feel free to write them in the chat or unmute yourself. Okay, so not hearing anything, which I also know with so much information, I know contact emails have been shared in the contact. If you're marinating this on the rest of the day, the rest of the week, a question might come out or pop up, feel free to reach out to us. I'm now going to ask our presenters sort of their call to action or their last bit of notes to leave us this morning. And I'm going to go in order of our presentation. So Miss Tina, could you start us off?
Sure. I think my final thoughts would be that I really enjoyed everyone else's presentation. I learned a lot about programs that I was not familiar with. And so I appreciate that. I will be probably reaching out to some of you to help us out with our empowerment workshops, because it's always good to have, you know, people in the area in that particular field, you know, help us. But I just like to remind everyone that when we build and serve Native American entrepreneurs, it's a specialized service. It's customized. And I always say this, there's not, you know, there's few in terms of population. I think that we can, you know, all together serve that need of the Native entrepreneur and continue to do the great work that we're doing. Thank you.
Miss Linnell and Miss Heather.
Yeah, I would just say thanks so much for having us and thinking of us for this presentation. We really appreciated the opportunity. And I would say, I guess our call to action would be, if you are interested, definitely, you know, do the additional research and also reach out to us. We're more than happy to help or, you know, answer questions or provide feedback any way we can. So if you think that this could potentially, you know, the CDFI model could potentially be a good fit for your community, definitely follow up.
And ditto. I just want to direct people also to our website. So if you're curious about any upcoming trainings, we do a lot of free webinars and national trainings. So that might be a good resource to start building your capacity within your organization. But we also have certification programs and such. So definitely tons of resources out there, and we're here for you guys.
Wonderful. And then last but definitely not least, James and Ed, do you have any last thoughts, a call to action, any parting words for us?
And I'm just appreciative, Rebecca, to share our story. However, understandably, this may not have been the same scenario for other tribes, and we work within our environment and feel fortunate that we have such a strong, tight-knit community of business owners, community members that we were able to utilize. And I think that's a big takeaway, encouraging you to strengthen your networks, you know, locally or, you know, regionally, nationally, like this is. So really appreciate the time, and thank you again. Yawa.
I just want to say it's great to share our story as well. You guys gave us some great information to take a look at. So definite things for us to explore as we help our local businesses to recover. We're still seeing the impacts because you got to remember, with us being on the Canadian border, we're not seeing the Canadian customers the way we were a year ago. So quite a few of our businesses have been impacted by the border closure. While we as a Mohawk community can go back and forth freely, our Cornwall customers, Montreal customers, Ottawa customers have been stopped at the border. And, you know, so even our local Canadian businesses see that effect from US customers who can't travel into Canada. And so you've given us some good thoughts to ideas and on what we can share with them and hopefully help them recover faster.
Great. Mado, thank you all again. It's been a couple hours since we last mentioned, but be on the lookout for more USET economic development virtual learning sessions. We're looking for new ideas and topics to have guest speakers to come speak about. So if you have any ideas, please reach out, let me know. We are hoping to have about 3 more of these throughout the year. So once a quarter, if that helps, I'm planning on calendars. And we're potentially looking at the next one on building generational wealth in communities, in tribal communities. But if you have any other recommendations for speakers, if you would like to speak, again, please let us know. We are here for you. With that, Thank you again. It's a lot. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Be on the lookout for an email from myself with copies of the slides, a copy of the recording. Everything will also be updated or included on our USET website as a reference. So if you have team members that wasn't able to make it this morning, or as we also see that we have rollover, and if you have new employees that get onboarded after this date that you would like them to be aware of this information, it will all be housed on our USET website as a library resource. So I hope everyone has a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.